Starting it now. I'm gonna kick it off.
Got it.
Thank you everyone for joining. I'm gonna wait about another minute or so to let the rest of the guests trickle in before we get started. All right, I think we're good to go. Thank you everyone for joining our session today. My name is Aaron Arnold. I'm a customer success manager over here at Entitle. I'd really like to point out first before we get started, this session will be recorded and recordings can be provided after the fact if you request it. If you have any questions or issues, feel free to utilize the Q&A or chat icons at the bottom of your screen. And first off, I'd like to introduce two people. First will be Tom Sturdivant, who will be leading a majority of the session today. Tom is a global leader of customer success, and he's responsible for some of our larger verticals of customers, ranging from food and packaging, pumps, machining and processing. And Tom comes from a technology background in optimizing the usage of sales and service solutions. Currently at Entitle, his role is really to work with customers across verticals and help them transition to proactive workflows across their aftermarket, sales, service, and using our data science and AI capabilities to really help them drive more revenue. Second off, I'd like to welcome our CEO and co-founder, Vivek Joshi. Vivek has worked in the industrial space for around roughly 30 years and really covered a wide range of verticals within this space. And he's really passionate about helping OEMs, very much like a lot of people on this call, drive more revenue in their aftermarket through our install-based data platform. So with that being said, Vivek, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Aaron. I appreciate it. And welcome everybody to today's webinar. It's been a few weeks since we had our last event, so good to see so many people join today. As Aaron said, Vivek Joshi, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Entitle. And I've been in this business for a long time. And again, an advantage of being in this business for a long time is that I've had a chance to live through and survive and thrive through many, many cycles. You know, back in the 90s, a couple of times, back in the 2000s, a few more times, and then of course, latest cycle we're going through right now. And what's common about all these people that you see on this logo sheet out here is they're not just big enterprise manufacturers with worldwide operations, but they too have been around for a long time and they too have succeeded and survived through many of these cycles. Right. And what's common amongst all of them is they've been focusing on their install base. They've been focusing on ways to monetize it and ways to kind of capture value out of it. And that's what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about today as well. Next slide, please, Tom. So when I start thinking about what's going on in the world around us, I mean, there's not a day that goes by where you don't see the headline about the recession, the slowdown in industrial production, the supply chain snafus coming out of pretty much every single country in the world. Investors are clearly voting with their feet, getting out of a lot of these stocks that I think are cyclically affected. You can start seeing the impact in the market and spending. Housing is absolutely taking a hit right now. And whether it's be self-induced or really induced, there's absolutely a recession that feels like it's coming out there. So with that fact, what does one do? Next slide, please, Tom. Clearly there's a lot of things going on in the world around us. The recession is just one piece of it. In addition to all these things going on here, we've seen so many impacts over the last 2 years with the advent of COVID, right? Clearly the inflationary pressures we're all seeing, the amount of inflation we're seeing, not just in our daily lives, but in terms of what we see from manufacturers, talking about small components, small insignificant components that they didn't pay attention to, having doubled and tripled in price. The supply chain issues that's been a result of or part of where these little components that should not be taking up much issue in the normal bill of materials have been holding up full shipments. And as a customer of mine, Mr. Vivek, if you walk or drive by a factory, you may think we're just this big tank maker because a whole bunch of tanks to come in, we could not assemble with the rest of our compression and assemblies that they have, right? So you have all these things waiting around because of supply chain issues. Rising interest rates are clearly putting a crimp on capex. And finally, the unsaid elephant in the room is this whole notion of generational transition that's going on with retiring workforce, brain drain, and tribal knowledge exiting these companies. So there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of headwinds around these companies. So what's a manufacturer do? Next slide, please. So if I harken back to my own experiences and the stuff I've been through in my life, when in doubt, you got to start focusing on operating margin, right? In the good days, you can start focusing on growth on the top line. But when things tighten up, everybody automatically defaults to EBITDA and operating margin, depending on how you define it. And it's all three components of it. It's the richness of it, if you may, in terms of are you really being able to maximize the percentage EBITDA, percentage operating margin from a revenue stream? Are you able to grow it? Cost cutting is clearly one aspect, but are you able to really start driving EBITDA and operating margin growth? And then what is the quality of your earnings, right? I mean, this is what people are going to default to, and that's what you're going to get rewarded in the stock market and valuation. Next slide, please, Tom. So when I start thinking about all these different aspects, where's the growth going to come from, right? We've talked about the inflationary effects on direct and indirect costs. Yeah, you could maybe reduce some inflationary effects, but it's not like you're going to get some upside on EBITDA and operating margin there. Revenue, we talked about the capex squeeze and capex slowdown. That just leaves me, and obviously this is a little biased in some ways, but having lived through these cycles, I know that for a fact. You could really rely on your aftermarket or install base for driving growth, and that's both in parts and service, retrofits, modifications, and so on and so forth. So lots of opportunities out there. Next slide, please, Tom. So when you start thinking about this business, we've seen this, like I said, over the last 30 years in the different cycles. It really is the ability to start capturing value from the installed base and making aftermarket your safe harbor in a stormy sea. And that's kind of why I wanted to interject for a few minutes, because like I said, we've seen many of these cycles, and I wanted to get to share the setup, a preamble as to why we want to do this. Without further ado, I want to turn this back over to Tom Sturtevant, who was the featured speaker today. So Tom, with that, over to you.
Hey, I'm going to interject real quick, Tom, before you take over. We have two questions, Vivek, for you. What are your observations in terms of recession across some of Entitle's customers that you've heard?
So we're seeing a mixed bag of things, right? So there are a few of our customers who've been enjoying extraordinarily large backlog over the last year. But that backlog is kind of a bit of a red herring in the sense that you can have backlog because you have good order growth, which a lot of people clearly saw coming out of the COVID early days. But the backlog's now grown because of supply chain issues. So it's a bit of a mixed message. The secular demand we are seeing dropping off. We have some customers who are in the materials handling space, for example, right? As soon as you started seeing Walmart.com, Amazon, and a whole bunch of retailers, if you may, start slowing down their growth, they started cutting back on warehouse orders and equipment orders and so on and so forth. So they've been absolutely hit. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but we're beginning to start definitely seeing and hearing of slowdowns. We're seeing and hearing of order activity slowing down, right? And so I'm expecting some of that to go. But on the other hand, there's one of the manufacturers that we've been working with for many, many years. The CEO told me they've had record backlog and record orders in aftermarket. Their parts business is up 50% this year, 50. I mean, it's ridiculous how big that is. So that's kind of stuff we're hearing and seeing now in the market, also in terms of both prospects and customer of ours. Hopefully that answers the question, Aaron.
Yeah, great answer, Vivek. And then one more before Tom takes over. How do you see this playing out differently than what we saw during the pandemic?
I think the pandemic was one of those strange events which created this artificial spike in demand for things that we could do because we were sitting at home for a long time with disposable income. I was just looking at some data over the weekend about household savings rates and now debt. And they're now moving in opposite directions, right? Household savings rates spiked during COVID, and that money was spent on things. And things could be furniture, things could be things to redo the house, and so on and so forth. But now that pandemic is gone, that demand has coming back in a different way, but there's shortages now. So when I started thinking about it, it was one of those demand imbalances, as I call it, which created supply imbalances, and that created all the issues we see going on now. The other thing that happened because of the supply and demand imbalance is, and again, this is firsthand information from many of our customers and prospects, we heard very clearly the people are quote unquote double ordering, right? Because they were not sure which supplier is going to get them the material they needed. And they would order with like 2 or 3 different suppliers. And all of these guys are doing it there with their eyes wide open, knowing fully well they will start canceling orders the second half of this year. And so that's the other part that's happening, where we saw the demand drop in the early days, came back strong, and the supply and demand imbalances are creating this big, strange situation where I think we're going to wind up with lots of cancellations later this year. So it's a more broad-based downturn that I think we're going to see coming out of this. Of course, this is just one man's observation, so hopefully take that with a grain of salt.
Of course. That's all I have right now for questions.
Awesome.
Everyone, please feel free to ask, or we'll have a Q&A at the end. So Tom, without further ado.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Vivek. Thanks, Aaron. So when trying to capitalize on your install base through aftermarket, there's really 3 major pain points that are hindering our customers and many OEMs. The first one being really a lack of access to data. A lot of the OEMs we work with have install base data that's in multiple different ERP systems. Maybe they switched those in the last couple of years or many times throughout the year. Maybe they're operating in multiple CRM systems, their field service systems aren't connected. There's really just a ton of different data that's scattered all across the systems, as well as just a lot of duplication and issues within that. You might be shipping to ABC Corp and ABC Inc. And all of these different things make it really hard to be able to get that consolidated view of your customer base and to be able to use this information to actually be able to drive actual insights. If you don't know where equipment is, what parts a customer's purchased, what services have been performed, it's really hard to target those customers with the correct offerings at the right times and really drive your aftermarket initiatives. And within these systems, you might have, again, information in your ERP, CRM, field service tools. It's hard to take this information and then push these opportunities to your sales teams, to your services teams to go and capitalize on this information. So these really 3 pain points really hinder our customers before implementing Entitle to really drive their aftermarket initiatives. And what you need to do and be able to, in order to drive these aftermarket initiatives, is first really characterize your install base. So really creating that consolidated view, knowing where your equipment is, what's happened to it, what parts of service customers have, and consolidating across all these different data sources allows you to understand how to target your install base better, so that you can use this information then to go out and target your customers with specific offerings. Maybe you want to create opportunities for modifications, upgrades, equipment replacement, services. It really helps to have all this information then available and easily segmented on for your customers that can be then made into actionable opportunities and create these targeted hunting lists that can then be refined. Once you actually have this data in place and the processes in place to actually utilize your install base data, this is where it really becomes important to create the different processes and teams to be able to transition from really a reactive nature to maybe taking orders from your customers to actually reaching out to sell proactively to your install base. And then lastly, being able to really track your opportunities and performance. That allows you then to really iterate on your initiatives, see what's working, and really drive success within your install base. So with that, I'm going to switch over to the Entitle platform to show actually how this can be done within your install base, how you can mine your data and create actionability that you can then push out to your teams. So let me switch over here to the Entitle environment. So just a quick setup. So this is Entitle Insights demo data inside of Salesforce. There's really kind of 2 different ways to access Entitle. We have our Salesforce integrated Entitle here, as well as our web-based application. So I'm going to jump right in here to the install base. And this is where you can start really mining your install base information for potential opportunities. And maybe I want to target my install base for modifications or upgrades going into recession, like Vivek was talking about. A lot of customers aren't spending as much on capital equipment, so they might be investing more on upgrading their current system. So I really want to capitalize on this and find and target my customers who would be a good opportunity and who might be interested in these services. So I can start by looking for customers who own maybe a particular category of equipment. So I'm going to select my Aquamate 20, and you're going to see I quickly get down to 2,000 locations, but I want to get more specific with the customers I'm talking to. So I might want to look at equipment age here, and I can easily drag our slider to show customers who own equipment that's older than 9 years in age, but not older than 60. Maybe these are customers who have that equipment that could be easily modified and upgraded. And need that since these are older. So I can put that in here, and now I'm getting down to a more targeted list here. And then I can also drop into my advanced search here. Maybe I want to look for those customers who haven't been purchasing service or haven't been doing preventive maintenance, knowing that, hey, they might need to have an upgrade or a modification more early than others, or might be needing that since they haven't performed much service on that. So I can select on that. And now I'm getting down here to a really targeted list of 500 locations that own this equipment that are really good candidates for that potential modification. And maybe I am working in the South, so that is my territory. And as a sales rep, I want to identify customers inside of my territory. And now I can get down to a really targeted list of these customers who I need to reach out to, who again have that older equipment and haven't been servicing. And I can layer in a ton of different filters here. So if I want to look for other indicators that they might need that, maybe there's parts they haven't purchased that would indicate that. Maybe I want to rule out customers who have done that based on parts. I can layer in all these different types of filters to really get down to my list of customers I want to target. And what I can do with this now, which comes into the actionability, is actually promote this to a pipeline. So I can go ahead and create this, and that's going to then subsequently create opportunities that I can reach out to and track inside of Entitle. And I can also push those into Salesforce if I want to utilize those and tracking capabilities inside of Salesforce. I can track the leads that I have identified. So once I create those, that's going to then bring us to our pipeline section. So I've created my pipeline for my customers I want to target, and now I can go actually look at that and dive into the customer details. Within the pipelines here, I have a number of different examples of ways that you can target your install base, looking for things such as customers who haven't purchased parts and services, looking for retrofit opportunities, re-engaging drifting customers, purchase PM kits, but haven't purchased those in the last couple of years. Really just a number of different ways that you can target these customers and reaching out to them. So if I go in here to an upgrade and retrofit opportunities, I can then see the customers that comprise this list. And then if I'm going to be calling out to one of these customers, this is where I can use the really complete visibility into your install base to research these customers before reaching out. So if I go to Connects Communications here, I can get an overview of this location, and I'm calling about upgrades and retrofits. So I can come in here and see what equipment this customer owns. It looks like they have 3 different Aquamate 20s, one of which is older in 2014. So this would be a piece of equipment that I want to reach out to them about upgrading or modifying or whatever that offer is. But while I'm reaching out to this customer, maybe there's other opportunities that I should be talking to them about besides just that upgrade or retrofit. So this is where I can come in and see all the different opportunities that this customer and specific location has that I could also be talking to them about. So if I come in here, I can see there's things about servicing their equipment. I can see they're part of that upgrade opportunity, but I can also see that there's some parts predictions in here as well. And maybe I want to talk to them about buying some additional parts while I'm calling on this customer. So I can come back in here to an opportunity, and I can see what exact parts are being predicted for this customer. So this is based on their historical buying habits. and predicting what parts they need to purchase to service their equipment. So I can select on one of these and see it's a part that's been purchased every couple of years. They haven't purchased it since 2020, so they're due to purchase this part here in the near future. So while I'm calling on them to offer up the upgrade and modification for their equipment, I can also talk to them about the different parts that they need to purchase as well, and track all these different opportunities inside of Entitle here as well. All right, with that, I'm going to flip back over here to my slideshow. And it looks like we had one question pop up. Vivek, did you want to take that one here while I switch over?
Yeah, let me take a look at the question. Aaron, is there a question from Olivia that says?
Yeah. How is Entitled different from a CRM?
Got it. So I think people always ask us the question, what's different about Entitled versus a CRM? And I think there's 2 or 3 different levels of answers I can give you. I think first and foremost, the way I've seen CRM used so far, it's invariably used primarily as a pipeline management tool, which means there's prospects in the pipeline. There is a way to kind of move them through a certain defined process, and most people use a CRM for that. Traditionally and historically, most people did not bring in all customer 360 level data, if you may, into a CRM. That's becoming a little bit more common these days. We hear that more often. But that leads us to the second question, where one of the slides that Tom showed is that there was no ability for people to have clean, high quality data, a single source of truth. And I think we're able to kind of bring that together as well in a very simple manner to start showing people what that data looks like, right? So I think that's the second piece of it that's different than a CRM. The third piece that's different is, you've heard certain CRM providers say, we have predictive analytics and we have all these artificial intelligence capabilities built into the CRM. And the fact of the matter is they're not. They're invariably professional service engagements that you have to sign up to, and becomes a very custom thing. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It is not standard off-the-shelf software. It's a very much a built for purpose, built for custom deployment kind of analytics and predictive sciences capabilities in there. So those are the 3 things that I think are very different about a CRM than Entitled. Having said that, as Tom demonstrated, a CRM and Entitled are coexisting very happily. In fact, more and more of our customers are embedding into our software, our capabilities through an integration to the CRMs that we most commonly see, which is Salesforce and Dynamics. Microsoft Dynamics are the most commonly ones we see today. So we coexist very nicely with CRMs. Hopefully that answers the question, Aaron.
Yeah, that was perfect, Vivek.
Tom, you brought the slide up. You're going to share a little bit of a story with a customer story here?
Yep, I'll just end with this last slide here, just kind of give context to what success within the install base looks like with Entitle. So just real quickly on a packaging machining OEM, before Entitle, they didn't really have really an approach to aftermarket. They're just doing a spray and pray method of, just kind of ad hoc reaching out to customers or reaching out to their top 10% of customers who usually purchase parts. They didn't have visibility into their install base. So didn't really know who to reach out to and what to reach out to them about. So after implementing Entitle, they had that visibility into their install base, and utilizing that segmentation that showed they were able to really drive aftermarket initiatives, get really specific with their customers, and prioritize who to reach out to and when to reach out to them and what to them about. And this all resulted in within the first year of closing 1.6 million in incremental aftermarket revenue for this OEM. So with that, I'll flip over to our last slide, and we can pause for any questions, Aaron.
Yeah, I have one right now, Tom, waiting on a few others more than likely, but you kind of showed it on the pipeline in the part of the demo, but what kind of revenue generation campaigns are our customers currently running? If you could just provide a few examples.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so initiatives are really ran across all different types of aftermarket initiatives. So anything around service, around parts. A lot of our customers look at selling kits, customers who haven't purchased parts in a while, customers who maybe have never purchased a part. Also looking at equipment, maybe there's equipment that needs to be replaced, modifications that need to take place, upgrades, retrofits, and then also just looking at customers as a whole. So as a customer hasn't purchased for a while, are they drifting? Maybe they're decreasing in spend, or maybe they're increasing in spend, and you want to capitalize on that as well. It really can be driven across all different aspects of your aftermarket, depending on what you sell and what you're trying to sell.
Thanks for that, Tom. I had one more question come in about what kind of integration do we have for Salesforce, but I answered that offline since we kind of showed it throughout the demo. I don't have any other questions that have come in right now. I guess we can wait a few more seconds and see if anyone has any last minute questions before we hop off here. Yeah, I think we're good, Tom and Vivek, unless you guys have any last minute tidbits.
No, I think as part of the closing comments, and first of all, thank you, Tom, for doing this, and thanks for everybody who attended today. I think the only message I'd give people as you log off this is, the opportunity in front of you is really where the value is going to get created over the next 12 to 24 months. We always believe at Entitled that your installed base, the value of your installed base is really the value of your company. And I think at these testing times that we're entering it's going to show its true value and true metal. So I just want to keep that in mind. Have you keep that in mind as you kind of build your operating plans. I know this is June, the end of June. A lot of people we're talking with building out their operating plans for middle to second half of August, September, and this is something to keep in mind as you make those plans. And that's the only parting comments or closing comments I have today, Aaron. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you everyone again for attending. Like Vivek said, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Tom, Vivek, or myself, and we will send out the recording afterwards to everyone that was in attendance, and hope you all have a fantastic day.
Thanks, everybody. Good evening, good night,
Thank
good
you,
day.
everybody.